Flake and Democrat Joe Manchin all voted yes. Republican Lisa Murkowski joined with Democrats to vote no.
I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
Something big changed. I don't see.
I could not conclude that he is the right person for the court at this time.
The United States Senate will also be making a statement. We'll either state that partisan politics can override the presumption of innocence, or we'll reaffirm that in the United States of America, everyone is innocent until proven guilty.
There's two choices, the Susan Collins way or the protester way. Who do you want to run the government?
This man has been mistreated. This man has been subjected to a set of procedures that were designed to trip him up.
14 men arrested at the Supreme Court as a crowd cheered them on.
The mob was not able to intimidate the Senate. We stood up to the mob. We did the right thing for a good man.
Good Saturday morning. This is a live look at the Senate floor just hours away from a key vote to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh. They voted for cloture, which means there's 30 hours of debate. Democrats have been talking all night long. If you want to watch their speeches, I guess you could turn it to C-SPAN, but you've heard it all before. Kirsten Gillibrand talking about why they shouldn't confirm Brett Kavanaugh, but the votes are predicted to be where they need to be in order to confirm him. They say later on today, if everything holds, as we've heard, it'll be a 50-48 vote in confirmation of the new Associate Justice, Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
And one present vote, because one of the senators, Daines from Montana, his daughter is getting married today. And so Murkowski is going to vote present to kind of offset him not being there. That's a Senate courtesy. Nice thing to do. Senators miss a lot of family moments. Yeah. And so, you know, walking your daughter down the aisle is pretty big. This is big, too, though.
This is big. So here's the votes. If you missed it, and you probably didn't at this point, but it's worth recapping. Susan Collins voted yes. Jeff Flake voted yes. A very tentative yes. Joe Manchin, yes. And as you said, Lisa Murkowski will be voting present, but is effectively a no vote, siding with the Democrats on this one, Griff.
And, you know, the moment that will be reviewed and referred to for years to come was Senator Susan Collins' floor speech, as we waited to find out in her speech, because it wasn't until the very end that she told us how she was going to vote, but it was really the content of her speech that really stands out in this whole story. Let's just quickly take a listen to what Senator Collins had to say.
Judge Kavanaugh has received rave reviews for his 12-year track record as a judge. In evaluating any given claim of misconduct, we will be ill-served in the long run if we abandon the presumption of innocence and fairness. I listened carefully to Christine Blasey Ford's testimony before the Judiciary Committee. I found her testimony to be sincere, painful, and compelling. To that leaker, who I hope is listening now, let me say that what you did was unconscionable, and you have sacrificed her well-being in a misguided attempt to win whatever political crusade you think you are fighting. I do not believe that these charges can fairly prevent Judge Kavanaugh from serving on the court. Mr. President, I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
You know, as you were mentioning earlier, Rachel, that, you know, Susan Collins is an unlikely person to really take the center stage. Yeah. But I believe that for years to come, the words of Senator Susan Collins, when she says, we must always remember that when passions are most inflamed, that fairness is most in jeopardy, will be the standard bearer for future nominations.
So some people think that Senator Lindsey Graham saved the hearings for the conservatives. Yeah. But he says,
one of them.
In fact, you said we should play it on a loop. His speech, like the entire show. He wanted us last week to just make that whole show. But Graham says that Senator Collins saved the Senate. Take a look.
It's historic. I mean, it changed the trajectory of where we're headed in the Senate in terms of confirming judges. She adopted the rule of law, rejected the rule of the mob. And if I had to tell somebody a good reason to vote for Judge Kavanaugh, I would ask them to look at Susan's speech. It was just incredible in detail, forcefully delivered. She didn't look like she was pained. She hated what happened to the process, but she was confident that Judge Kavanaugh was the right guy at the right time. So I think she saved the Senate and the judiciary from sliding into the abyss.
She also saved a conservative majority on the Supreme Court for a generation. I mean, this is the first. We have to step back in these moments sometimes and realize how fortunate as someone who voted for this president myself, hoping that you would confirm conservative justices. This is a win for the Second Amendment, for free speech, for religious freedom, for unborn babies. This is a big day for conservatives who have been hoping that someday a conservative president would put conservative justices on the court. Today at 5, 6 o'clock, we may see that actually happen.
4:52 p.m.
Oh, 4:52? Thank you, Griff.
I might just add to that, it might just save the House. You know, Susan Collins, as we have been talking about all morning, is a very unlikely conservative hero, right? She's very independent-minded. Sometimes she votes with the Democrats. Sometimes she votes with the conservatives. But the way she laid this out, 44-minute speech, empathy for Dr. Ford, but also showing some holes in her testimony. But in the end, talking about the process and the dirty tricks. And a lot of independents respect her, admire her, that she was the one that came out with this speech, I think might actually be decisive in some of those votes come November.
And her reasoned approach will resonate with a lot of those ears. It's a great point, Rachel. Well, Dan Rather, who fancies himself a journalist, but we all know that's a sham. He said this on Facebook about Susan Collins. He said, so Collins misses her moment to be a hero, and the old bulls win again. Trump, McConnell, Grassley, Hatch, Graham, the whole lot of them win. Again, they're laughing, congratulating one another, and at least metaphorically popping champagne. I hope they are, actually. I know President Trump is and he doesn't drink, but the rest of them, I hope they should.
And, you know, Mitch McConnell, we have to pull him out of that and to say, you know, this was a big victory for him. And, you know, Pete and I have talked a lot on this show about this when we've had these processes. But Mitch McConnell blocked Merrick Garland. Mitch McConnell shepherded in Neil Gorsuch. And now it looks like Mitch McConnell will bring in Brett Kavanaugh. And so Mitch McConnell deserves quite a tremendous amount of accolade in this entire process. And this was probably will be the most significant vote of Mitch McConnell's.
But I think Donald Trump deserves a lot of credit. I mean, there was a lot of pressure on, you know, the vitriol, the sexism, misogyny, all these attacks. And Donald Trump stood strong. And I've always said, and we talked about this with Diamond and Silk a little earlier, I thought the victory of Donald Trump in 2016 was going to be significant for the Republicans because he was going to teach them how to fight. And you saw they all stood strong. And you see some of these attacks even now after this. Do we have the tweet on the Susan Collins?
Well, yeah, we have
attacking her.
Absolutely. So the left is totally attacking on this. It's predictable. But I think, to your point, the very interesting outcome of this, and this is the tweet from
the Women's March.
Senator Collins is a rape apologist. This kind of over-the-top stuff, I think it turns a lot of people off. Who thinks she's an apologist for rape?
Of course not. It's totally absurd, and that's why the Kavanaugh effect is a real one. That's why Republicans have coalesced around this president. The fighters, you know, Chuck Grassley, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, we'll talk about that more in a second, but the headline from the Wall Street Journal, in an article by Gerald Sieb, said, Kavanaugh fight binds Trump and his party. I think that is absolutely true. I don't know if we have this clip. So you and I have talked a little bit about Mitch McConnell, right? And I've wondered if he'll really fight and where he's been on some things. You're a little bit more pro. I've been a little bit more hesitant. You know, a commercial came to mind, and I hope we have it, of the way I feel about Mitch McConnell this morning. He ate something and he's ready to go. Listen.
Mike, what is your deal, man?
Oh, come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby. Eat a Snickers. Better?
Better. You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
Ate his Snickers. I have Snickers for you guys this morning.
I saw here,
Dave,
Pete,
I got a Snickers for you, too. Always sharing. Oh, missed. On top of the prompter. Sorry,
in the ingredients here, I see dragon energy.
Yes. Mitch McConnell ate his Snickers, and he showed up and he said, I got my A game. I'm going to win this one for the country.
Well, you know, the Gerald Sieb article in Wall Street Journal is very appropriate because McConnell did stare down. I mean, he's the sound bites of him saying, I'm staring down the mob. And Chuck Grassley as well, saying I'm not going to be intimidated by these groups. And that tweet from the Women's March calling Susan Collins a rape apologist, they were driving. I covered the protesters all week long. They were driving all of the protest. It is the woman that got in the elevator with Jeff Flake, all a part of this. And so what Susan Collins did is to give fuel to affirm the power of senators in Article 2 of the Constitution to advise and consent on nominees nominated to higher office. And Susan Collins says, look, I've looked at Judge Kavanaugh's record. I don't agree with him on women's rights, but I do agree with him on other issues like Obamacare.
But to me, Susan Collins was the end result of a long process that starts, as you said, with Trump, who taught Republicans how to fight. Lindsey Graham stood up. Chuck Grassley stood up. Orrin Hatch stood up. Mitch McConnell stood up. All these guys, you kind of look around and you go, where you been? They all ripped open a Snickers, and they're like, it's time to show up. And they did.
And Pete, there's one other thing that Trump is teaching them. He's teaching that people like winners. So they're winning on this. By the way, the left is not going to stop fighting. But come November, I think Republicans go, this is a team I can get behind. They're united. They're winning. We all like winners. And I think that's what we're going to see.
And that fight has exposed the left's hysteria, which people don't like either. Yeah.
Well, I don't have
while you read headlines, I'm going to eat the rest of my Snickers and have a better...
I'll wait on mine until I do these headlines.
That's right.
All right. A 2-year-old boy is tragically killed when a bounce house takes off in fierce winds. The family of Caleb Acuna was visiting a Nebraska pumpkin patch when nearly 60-mile-per-hour winds picked up the inflatable bouncy house, and Caleb's 5-year-old sister was thrown off and broke her arm. Caleb was carried more than 100 feet and suffered a critical head injury. He later died at a hospital. What a horrific incident. It is now under investigation. The size of your airplane seat may soon be regulated by the government. President Trump signing an FAA reauthorization bill, giving the agency 1 year to come up with standard requirements. While many have praised the measure, hope it'll force airlines to stop shrinking seats and legroom, there is no guarantee that it will actually happen.
Rachel, I'll take it from here if that's cool.
Yeah, it's sports. Yeah.
All right, taking a look at Major League Baseball playoffs. Clayton Kershaw leading the LA Dodgers to a 3-0 shutout win over the Atlanta Braves. No tomahawk chop there. The Dodgers taking a 2-game series lead. And the Boston Red Sox survive a late comeback in Beantown to draw first blood against the New York Yankees.
Needing a base runner. And Judge rips one right field. Long way to go, Betts. He's at the wall. And she's gone. Aaron Judge with a solo home run.
Aaron Judge hit his ninth inning heroics. He hit a one-run home run. I guess it's a one-run home run. It's a solo. As the Red Sox tape Game 1 in Boston with a 5-4 victory, the Milwaukee Brewers are one step closer to the promised land as well, winning 4-0 to take a 2-game series lead over the Colorado Rockies. And the Houston Astros taking Game 1 with a 7-2 win over the Cleveland Indians. It feels like October when the Yankees and the Red Sox are playing. I'm a fan, that's not necessarily of either, but it's fun baseball to watch.
All right, from Aaron Judge to Judge Brett Kavanaugh, confirming him as the next Supreme Court justice would be just the latest victory for the Trump administration. Reaction from the White House next.
Plus, Tim Tebow has a message for Alabama football fans. Stop being entitled. We'll explain ahead.
We're back with the Fox News alert. The Trump administration celebrating a huge political victory.
Senators are expected to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh today as the president hits the road for a rally in Kansas.
And Kevin Corke is live outside of the White House. Kevin, good morning.
Always good to be with you guys. Good morning. And you're right. We're certainly looking forward to what should be a raucous evening in the great state of Kansas later on as the president and the White House potentially will be celebrating the elevation to the high court of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Let me take you to Twitter. The president saying to the Senate very clearly yesterday he was very proud of them for voting yes to advance the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. You also saw the press secretary, Sarah Sanders. She was all over the air yesterday and the day before, simply put on Twitter, she said thank you to Senator Collins for standing by her convictions and doing the right thing to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. Now, all this happened after that dramatic speech by Senator Collins yesterday on Capitol Hill. If you haven't seen it, folks, get online, take a look. It really was something to behold. And by the way, it happened amid ferocious opposition on the Hill. And in fact, that was something that we heard South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham talk about last night.
If you think you can change her mind by yelling at her and showing up at her house, you're dead wrong. Again, I just want to compliment her for stopping what I thought was the closest thing to McCarthyism in my lifetime, that a man is guilty until proven innocent, facts don't matter. Smearing him equates to him being disqualified. She stood pretty tall. The best thing that can happen to a good man.
Stood pretty tall indeed. And as you take a look at the 4 that were thought to be sort of swing votes, you see Jeff Flake will be a yes. Lisa Murkowski of the great state of Alaska will be a no, although the record will reflect her vote as a present. Instead, you see Collins a yes and Manchin also as a yes. All eyes on the Hill and the clock as we look forward to the senators making their voices heard as they are expected to confirm the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Quite a day yesterday here. We suspect it'll be pretty interesting as well. I've already reached out to White House officials just to sort of get a sense of what the mood is. As I get more texts here on my phone and notes back, I'll pass them along. But for now, guys, back to you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Senator Joe Manchin shouted down by protesters after announcing his vote for Kavanaugh.
Look at us! 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 Shame! Shame!
But based on what you've seen, was that an thorough investigation of the FBI?
But should Manchin listen to the protesters or the voters in his state? Our political panel is here to weigh in live.
Some quick headlines. First Lady Melania Trump landing in Egypt overnight, the last stop on her trip in Africa. Children giving her a warm greeting on the tarmac. And next, she's going to head to the presidential palace before touring the pyramids. It's her first overseas trip as First Lady. And President Trump is also on the move today. He's heading to a Make America Great Again rally in Kansas tonight, despite having 4 rallies under his belt. The president will be making stops at 4 more states next week in Kentucky, Ohio, Iowa, and Pennsylvania. Pete?
Campaign is in full effect. Thank you very much, Rachel. Well, Senator Joe Manchin, one of the final expected yay votes to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. And immediately and predictably, he's facing protesters.
Look at us! 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 Shame! Shame!
But based on what you've seen, was that an thorough investigation of the FBI?
And this was one of many scenes that played out this week where you saw protesters shouting down and confronting senators. But have these tactics actually backfired? Well, let's ask spokesperson for the RNC, Kayleigh McEnany, political analyst Rochelle Ritchie, and managing editor for Olympic Media, Katie Freites. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Kayleigh, let me start with you. So look at us and shame are the mantra of that particular clip. What are the protesters trying to achieve?
What they're trying to achieve is intimidation. This is what Mitch McConnell said. This is not about persuasion. This is about intimidation. They will shout down individuals in an effort to change their vote, but it's not working. It's backfiring. These protesters, many of them are paid by George Soros. It is a manufactured protest intended to demonize any male in this country. We heard that from Mazie Hirono. If you're a male, it's time for you to just shut up. That was coming from the mouth of a United States senator, and that is the goal of these protesters.
Rochelle, let me ask you a question. Senator Manchin said that he empathizes with the victims of sexual assault, but pointed out the report didn't corroborate evidence from 36 years ago. Can't you hold that position? Hey, I empathize, but in this particular case, there's no evidence.
Absolutely. And I think that it is fair to say that there was unfortunately not enough tangible evidence to hold Kavanaugh accountable for those sexual assault allegations. And you also have to keep in mind that Manchin is in West Virginia. It's a split state, a state that Trump won. So he had a lot to kind of lose in this situation. But my message to the protesters at this point is that, you know, Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed. We know this is going to happen today or tonight. And so it is time time to turn this tide to our local, to our state lawmakers, because if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it's going to be the decision by the states. The states will determine basically women's reproductive rights. And so it's time for them to take this energy and go back home, go to their states and push their lawmakers, their state lawmakers, to retain women's reproductive rights if that is exactly what they want to do.
Katie, Rochelle makes a very responsible and important point. After this, the fight moves to the midterms. How does this cut?
Well, I think, again, both panelists have mentioned something very important in this, in that it's either, to many on the left, it seems either a black or white issue. Either you support Judge Kavanaugh or you support women. There's no gray area in between there where there's a lack of evidence and a lack of corroboration, and that's all there is. And I think the important thing to remember, Pete, is that Senators Joe Manchin, Collins, and Flake, what they have signaled to America is that we adhere to the rule of law, not to the rule of emotion. And in this case, that is what is happening. You have the left repeatedly going by the rule of emotion and lacking those facts necessary to distinguish that there's an allegation here, but there's no corroboration and no evidence. And of course, it will go to the states and it will go to local elections, and we'll have to see how it plays out there. But for right now, I applaud what Joe Manchin has done.
Kayleigh, Rochelle brought about the issue of Roe v. Wade and it going to the states. For conservatives, Kayleigh, this is the first 5-4 majority they'll see on the Supreme Court in their lifetimes. Talk about the implications of the court now siding on the conservative side.
Oh, this is monumental. I can't emphasize that enough, to have 5 justices who now respect the Constitution, who respect the rule of law, who respect the Constitution in the way the founders envisioned it. For decades, the left has been using the Supreme Court as a mechanism to implement their legislative priorities. It's not about voting. It's not about the legislature deciding. It is about the court implementing the leftist will. We saw that with Roe v. Wade and other issues. And for the first time, you will have a court that respects the rule of law in the place of Congress, in the place of elections, in the place of the executive branch. This is monumental. It cannot be overemphasized that this is a historic achievement for President Trump.
Rochelle, a lot of people suggesting the left overplayed their hand. Do you think your side of the ledger will learn from some of these tactics, maybe back down a little bit and say we've got to win on other terms?
Look, at the end of the day, although these sexual allegations cannot be corroborated by the FBI, Kavanaugh still showed that he was not really qualified to be on the bench outside of what's on his resume, because he went on a political rant during his testimony where he was blaming the Clintons for everything that was happening to him. So I think we need to be a little careful and understand that this judge is going to be a partisan judge, and we hope that he can respect the Constitution.
Katie, your response, last word.
He was being accused falsely of things like gang rape.
He's not being accused of a crime. It's not a crime. He's not being charged with a crime. It's a job interview.
That is absolutely absurd.
Let Katie, of course he was being impugned in the court of public opinion.
He was not charged.
Go ahead.
He was not charged.
His name were being run through the mud. He is absolutely allowed to show emotion in the fact that
I didn't say he couldn't show emotion.
A rapist. Yes, you did. You just said that.
No, I didn't. I said he went on a political rant. That's what I said.
No.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg did as well.
No one had qualified and being angry. He was allowed to be angry in that position.
He is allowed to be angry.
What those Democrats did was abhorrent.
Righteous indignation is what it looked like to me. All three of you, thank you very much this morning.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, well, a former Google boss now taking aim at Silicon Valley. Why she's calling the tech giants delusional. Plus, who are the biggest winners and losers from the Kavanaugh confirmation battle? The three of us, Rachel, Griff, and I, put our heads together. We've got our big picks coming up next. We are back with a Fox News alert. Well, more than 100 anti-Brett Kavanaugh protesters are arrested as demonstrations continue to rage throughout Capitol Hill.
And in a few hours, senators will cast their final votes, which are expected to confirm the Supreme Court justice nominee.
And Jillian Turner is live in Washington, where more protests are expected today. Jillian, what are you seeing? And good morning, by the way.
Good morning, guys. Good morning. Good early morning to you. Yesterday was a very long day for protesters of all stripes here on Capitol Hill, pro and anti-Kavanaugh protesters alike. Everybody managed to keep it cool, calm, and collected, though. The protests were mostly very peaceful. They did reserve some of their sort of harshest language and criticism for Senator Manchin right after He announced he was going to be a yes vote on Kavanaugh. When it comes to the lawmakers, regardless of where they stand on Kavanaugh's nomination, they're making it abundantly clear that they're not very happy with the way this entire confirmation process has unfolded so far.
One can only hope that the Kavanaugh nomination is where the process has finally hit rock bottom.
So today, protesters are gearing up to again congregate here on Capitol Hill. I'm standing in the atrium of the Senate Hart Building. Organizers told me late last night before we left here that they're going to start converging about 9 a.m. This is the anti-Kavanaugh side of the protest. This will, again, maybe be ground zero today for folks like the women's movement, Cancel Kavanaugh, Believe Survivors, etc. But we have heard from Capitol Hill police already that they are considering not allowing anybody into the Senate buildings today at all. Back to you guys.
Wow. That's interesting. And do you see, Jillian, very quickly, do you see a Capitol Police presence there getting ready for what we anticipate to be?
Yeah, so I've been here for a few hours already. There is a police presence, a fairly heavy police presence compared to other Saturdays, you know, in the early morning hours. We would not normally see this many. And this is despite the fact that there is nobody around these buildings yet. I think the police are thinking that as the morning goes on, because it's such a beautiful day here and because we now know when the vote's going to be, many, many more people are going to show up than was expected.
I think you're going to be very busy later today, Jillian Turner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jillian.
And
I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, in the shadow of that really ugly piece of art in the middle of the Hart Building. If you've ever been there.
Yeah. Listen, I was there all week long, and that's why I wanted to just take 1 second to really applaud the U.S. Capitol Police. Inspector Pickett is running the show there, and really from the very beginning of this confirmation process, whether it was the protest inside the hearings or what we witnessed on Thursday.
Maybe he's one of the.
They have done such a tremendous job.
He could be one of the winners and losers from this week.
Depending on how he secures, the Capitol.
Well, honestly, I mean, think about the freedom of this nation to chase senators down the hall, and it is because of the Capitol Police that can maintain that absolute mob, as Mitch McConnell says, running around trying to influence it. Because of the freedom of this country, the Capitol Police are allowing it to happen.
Well, there were a few moments this week where I was wondering, where were the Capitol Police?
It happens. So we talked. So when days like this happen, you look back, and again, the vote's still going to happen later on today, about 5 o'clock. But you look at who are some of the winners and losers from this confirmation process. Now that it looks like Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed, we put our heads together, and kind of in Captain Obvious style, and we said, I mean, it's quite obvious. Listen, Susan Collins, we've talked about her all morning. She gave that courageous speech on the Senate floor. But Mitch McConnell, no doubt, shepherded this confirmation through. Lindsey Graham, in some ways, kept it alive in committee. And obviously, President Trump stood firm throughout the whole thing. Who else? Any other names we're missing there?
I was going to say Dr. Ford's friend Leland. I mean, she had a lot of pressure to change her version of the facts. And she stood strong. And I think the fact that she didn't reverse that and didn't give in to pressure, I think also had a big impact on this outcome.
And I think, Chuck Grassley deserves a blue ribbon here, too, as well as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, because it is quite unprecedented how close this came to going really off the rails. And as the chairman of the committee, he did a good job.
So let's do losers. We say the process, the protesters. I might add George Soros.
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah, he spent a lot of money.
As the president said, those signs aren't made with love in the basement. I love that tweet. Dianne Feinstein and the creepy porn lawyer, Michael Avenatti.
That's right. I mean, so many people overplayed their hand so heavily because the spotlight was so bright. A lot of money spent. The mob descended. I mean, look at what Dianne Feinstein, I don't know if it was her or her staff or someone near her who leaked it, but potentially ruined someone's entire life, and a cascading effect from someone who had been through a traumatic experience and was exposed in the public that didn't want to be public. A lot of losers, unfortunately.
I got to add one more loser, and that is a little bit off the page here, but Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, who had his Spartacus moment tried to leak things, and then he failed even trying to leak things. I'm not sure whether he was going to be a 2020 candidate. He's hinted at that, but he had a few fumbles here.
If you're going to be Spartacus, you better get your shots in. What did we miss? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Winners or losers that we missed. We'll play some of your best.
Definitely like to hear what you have to say on that.
Yes.
But right now we're going to turn to some headlines. A 74-year-old man is charged with the murder of a South Carolina police officer. Fred Hopkins is accused of ambushing several cops with an assault rifle from the second-story window of his home. Police say Hopkins opened fire because they were coming to question his son about a sexual assault allegation. 30-year Department veteran Sergeant Terrence Caraway was shot and killed during the standoff. 6 other officers were injured. So sad. A former insider is calling on Silicon Valley to get real. Jessica Powell, Google's ex-public relations chief, now imploring all internet titans to stop being delusional in a new essay. She says Google and its competitors take themselves far too seriously while not taking their own responsibilities seriously enough. Powell also calling out Amazon and Facebook, urging the tech giants to live up to the visions they market to the world. And winning big seems to be getting boring for Alabama football fans. After 5 national championships over the last decade, Tim Tebow is agreeing with head coach Nick Saban's disappointment. Saban, this is where these guys are supposed to save me in my sports readings here. In the poor game attendance from students, take a look.
I think the fans are getting so entitled there at Alabama, specifically the students. Listen, as a student, you've done nothing to win all these titles, okay? You say you're the best fans in college football. Well, you need to show up.
The former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback speaking out on ESPN. The undefeated Crimson Tide are looking to go 6-0 against Arkansas on the road this afternoon. And those are your headlines.
You did great with the rest of it.
Sure I did. You guys are liars. Both of them were like cringing, going, get her to stop reading the sports.
Saban, just say Saban.
Well, you can get this name right. Rick Reckmuse.
That's right.
Who has the weather?
Hold on, I got stuck when you said against.
I know.
Every time you say that word.
Did
You guys hear that?
I know. That's a funny thing I'd say, and I don't know how to change it. I've tried.
Didn't come from Arizona, I'll tell you that much. All right, guys, let's talk a little weather out there. We've got some big storms right across the central part of the country. It's an area that's been waterlogged for the last number of months, and over the weekend, more rain coming, unfortunately, parts of West Texas, throughout Oklahoma, into Kansas and Iowa, parts of Illinois as well. We're going to see some localized flooding. We have it going on already. Unfortunately, the rain continues, likely probably into at least about Tuesday. All right, pick your city across the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, Northeast. We're going to see some showers across parts of upstate New York. We'll see some scattered clouds kind of throughout the day today. More heavier showers moving across parts of upstate New York later on today as well. Down to the south, get ready. Nice conditions right now. By around Wednesday, we could be looking at some sort of a tropical system in across areas of the Central Gulf. Certainly more moisture moving in that will cause some big problems as well. All right, guys, back to you inside.
Rick, thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate it. All right, well, constitutional law professor and Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley on the big Kavanaugh confirmation developments. We want to know what he thinks, and so do you. So we're going to bring him in next.
Welcome back. As the Senate prepares its final vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh today, Democrats are not ready to give up the fight yet. Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler telling the New York Times if his party wins the House, they'll investigate him, saying, quote, "We are going to have to do something to provide a check and balance, to protect the rule of law and to protect the legitimacy of one of our most important institutions." Here to react, Fox News contributor and constitutional law professor at George Washington University, Jonathan Turley. Professor, I ask you, Jerry Nadler is the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. I take his words at their merit. Do you believe that there is a justified investigation should Democrats win?
No, it's a dreadful idea. Indeed, there was something called the Dreadful Council. It was used in medieval times where you could actually dig someone up and put them on trial. Pope Stephen VI did that with one of his predecessors and dug up the previous pope, put him on the throne, and asked him to answer for his crimes. And not surprisingly, he didn't and was found guilty. So sure, you could have a trial for the dead if you wanted, or the confirmed. But it is a dreadful idea. The framers created this process to have some finality. Now, the Democrats may not like the outcome of the vote, but over 50 senators are expected to be satisfied with this record and to confirm this nominee. If we're going to start to do do-overs every time the majority changes, then we will never have a stable court.
What do you make of the media's reaction? I want to play for you just a quick soundbite that happened on another channel. Take a listen to this.
Now we have Justice Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, or likely will have both of them. That is 2 out of 9 sitting justices have been credibly accused of sexual misconduct and then go on to be confirmed anyway. So I do think that the question is not whether or not they're going to be nice to him, but whether or not the other justices are possibly going to change their voting behavior in response.
What do you say to that, Professor?
I don't think that's going to happen. Look, this is the world's smallest club. It's 9 people. Every one of those votes is deeply consequential. They have to work together. But I don't see any difference in how they relate with Clarence Thomas. I mean, they generally are a very cordial group. They have to compromise. They have to discuss these issues.
Let me just quickly... Go ahead.
No, but the other thing is that when you say these are credible allegations, people like Susan Collins found them unproven, found them not to be credible enough to actually vote against them.
Well, and, you know, Collins really, I think, is going to be talked about for a long time because she said, you know, when passions are at their highest, fairness and presumption of innocence is most under attack. But let me get back to the court, and that is Justice Elena Kagan has this quote about staying independent on the court. She says all of us need to be aware of that, every single one of us, and to realize how precious the court's legitimacy is. It's an incredibly important thing for the court to guard, is this reputation of being impartial, being neutral, and not being simply an extension of a terribly polarizing process. Very interesting, her comments, don't you think, in the wake of all of this?
Well, I thought the thing that was most interesting is she was lamenting that the swing justice was no longer on the court, that there would be no middle justice, which seems rather curious, that if you want to have a moderate court, you can actually move to the center and be that swing justice. But she was lamenting that now there won't be a swing and that the court will be polarized. And it just seemed to miss a step to me that if you want that more moderate result, there's still 8 of you, now 9, and any one could fill that role.
Good point. Professor Turley, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the Saturday, and I know you'll be watching with the rest of us when that vote comes down. Thanks, sir. All right, Susan Collins' female colleague standing right behind her as she announced her support for Judge Kavanaugh. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith was one of them. She joins us next. Stay tuned. Welcome back. As the Senate prepares its final vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh today, Democrats are not ready to give up the fight yet. Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler telling the New York Times if his party wins the House, they'll investigate him, saying, quote, "We are going to have to do something to provide a check and balance, to protect the rule of law and to protect the legitimacy of one of our most important institutions." Here to react, Fox News contributor and constitutional law professor at George Washington University, Jonathan Turley. Professor, I ask you, Jerry Nadler is the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. I take his words at their merit. Do you believe that there is a justified investigation should Democrats win?
No, it's a dreadful idea. Indeed, there was something called the Dreadful Council. It was used in medieval times where you could actually dig someone up and put them on trial. Pope Stephen VI did that with one of his predecessors and dug up the previous pope, put him on the throne, and asked him to answer for his crimes. And not surprisingly, he didn't and was found guilty. So sure, you could have a trial for the dead if you wanted, or the confirmed. But it is a dreadful idea. The framers created this process to have some finality. Now, the Democrats may not like the outcome of the vote, but over 50 senators are expected to be satisfied with this record and to confirm this nominee. If we're going to start to do do-overs every time the majority changes, then we will never have a stable court.
What do you make of the media's reaction? I want to play for you just a quick soundbite that happened on another channel. Take a listen to this.
Now we have Justice Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, or likely will have both of them. That is 2 out of 9 sitting justices have been credibly accused of sexual misconduct and then go on to be confirmed anyway. So I do think that the question is not whether or not they're going to be nice to him, but whether or not the other justices are possibly going to change their voting behavior in response.
What do you say to that, Professor?
I don't think that's going to happen. Look, this is the world's smallest club. It's 9 people. Every one of those votes is deeply consequential. They have to work together. But I don't see any difference in how they relate with Clarence Thomas. I mean, they generally are a very cordial group. They have to compromise. They have to discuss these issues.
Let me just quickly... Go ahead.
No, but the other thing is that when you say these are credible allegations, people like Susan Collins found them unproven, found them not to be credible enough to actually vote against them.
Well, and, Collins really, I think, is going to be talked about for a long time because she said, when passions are at their highest, fairness and presumption of innocence is most under attack. But let me get back to the court, and that is Justice Elena Kagan has this quote about staying independent on the court. She says all of us need to be aware of that, every single one of us, and to realize how precious the court's legitimacy is. It's an incredibly important thing for the court to guard, is this reputation of being impartial, being neutral, and not being simply an extension of a terribly polarizing process. Very interesting, her comments, don't you think, in the wake of all of this?
Well, I thought the thing that was most interesting is she was lamenting that the swing justice was no longer on the court, that there would be no middle justice, which seems rather curious, that if you want to have a moderate court, you can actually move to the center and be that swing justice. But she was lamenting that now there won't be a swing and that the court will be polarized. And it just seemed to miss a step to me that if you want that more moderate result, there's still 8 of you, now 9, and any one could fill that role.
Good point. Professor Turley, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the Saturday, and I know you'll be watching with the rest of us when that vote comes down. Thanks, sir. All right, Susan Collins' female colleague standing right behind her as she announced her support for Judge Kavanaugh. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith was